How you guys doing? Happy to take your questions, please.
Parker Gabriel, Denver Post. I guess for each of you, just what'd you like about Jahdae? And you said you thought, the board might come to you a little bit given how you had players graded. What were you expecting him to get there, and just what was your process sort of as you went through the evening?
We weren't expecting him to be there. He was pretty high up on our board. What we liked about him is just, he's a playmaker. He's a football player. He's a fun watch. Sean, I did him during the season and after the season, and then Sean and I watched him last week. We just couldn't stop watching him. Just the instincts, the anticipation, the route awareness, zone coverage, really sticky in man, doesn't give up many completions. I don't think he gave up a touchdown. We kept looking. The ball skills, in the run game, this guy's really good in the run game, really good tackler, really good blitzer, and he plays all over the field. This guy's got really good football intelligence, so he just kind of fits everything we're looking for in a player. We talk about versatility, football intelligence, playmaking ability. He's just going to add to a really good defense, so we're excited to have him.
Sean and George, Zach Stevens from DNVR. Where do you expect him to initially play? Inside, outside?
Well, I think one of the things that was real apparent when we studied him, and one of the things that was attractive about the player is his versatility. You see snaps, like you're following him all around the film, his junior year, senior year, he's outside, he's inside. I think he's got great versatility. George hit on it. His football IQ is outstanding. And then there's some ties. Vance, his brother, was his position coach. Now he's at the Saints, but he's been his position coach for most of his career. So the versatility was something where you don't have to pigeonhole him to one spot or another. I might add that we are at a max with Texas players, so I don't care how good the next Texas player is. Someone comes in, someone's got to go.
On the left, Eric Delisle, DenverBroncos.com. Coach, you talked about it from a football standpoint, but from a personal standpoint, getting to know him, what were those conversations like? I think
Real good.
An odd tweet, but Matthew McConaughey said that he's one of the best guys that he's gotten to know at Texas. I'm just wondering personally, how you get to know him.
There's a ton of experience in that room. I think George and I are like pretty much on the same year in the league as far as coming in at the same time. This many drafts. We have scouts that have been in the room for 45 drafts. Like a bright energy to him. And for the first time, I've never had this happen where he politely asked, when we're finished, could you guys put me on speakerphone? And after he finished with Greg, Mr. Pinner, we put him on speakerphone. He thanked everyone in the room for the process and talked about his mother and the journey. And I've never, I've never had that happen. Look, you get various degrees of intel. You have the football on film, and then all the other things with his coach Sark, Vance's brother. When you have these ties, and he was an A+ learner, like in an elite interview learner. And then when you watch the film, you're trying to minimize misses or mistakes as best you can. And I could understand. I haven't seen any social media, but I could understand why those would feel that way. Darren Rizzi, his son, is an ops there with Texas. Like the amount of information we were fortunate enough to have, we don't always get the same with other players.
Question for George, Chris Thomas in Denver Gazette. How much consideration did you have in taking a running back at number 20 and not taking one? Does that increase the urgency to perhaps take one in round 2?
Yeah, there was a runner that we considered in that range. I think that was more of a trade back scenario. We had some opportunities, to trade back, but we feel good, moving forward with, like we've said throughout the process. There's a lot of runners in this draft, and you never know, but we feel pretty good we'll get a runner in this draft. There's a lot of them. If there's not, we'll sign one after the draft, we'll sign a free agent, there's a lot of good players left in the draft, and we feel good with where we're at. A lot of offensive players, a lot of weapons left, and so we got a weapon on defense, first round.
This is for Coach Troy Rink with the Denver Post. This is for Coach Payton. Coach, did you have any temptation to move up as the tight end thing got a little different? You and George, was there any temptation to move up for
No, I
anyone?
think this was a year that, it's interesting early in the process, some of the early projections are where might guys go. But again, that's hard to project before combine, before like all the in-depth evaluations. And so I think we felt like this was a pick at our number or possibly move back year based on how the board said. And George just alluded to it, that, where you're at tonight now and the stretch tomorrow in the next 2 rounds, there are a lot of football players that would be, I think as you went around the league, would have similar grades. Obviously, the further out you go round-wise, it's kind of like buckshot, that it spreads. But I think you're hitting a little bit of maybe the honey hole of this draft in tomorrow's first and even into tomorrow's second and even into the 3rd round. And so I don't think forward, every team up there, every team they were all looking to come back. And the reason was really how the board was set, I think, with most of the teams in the league.
Yeah, guys, I think the mock drafts were 0 for 300 predicting who you're going to take here. I think one of the reasons where the surprise is people didn't think cornerback, it looked, not really a position of need or priority need. Was this simply taking the best player available rather than drafting for need?
Yeah, it's a premium position, for one, Mike. I've said it before, you can't have enough good cover guys. We lost, we had a few injuries this year, and you saw what kind of happened. And so we can't have enough good cover guys. This guy was just unique, for where he was on our board. I talk about the football player, the playmaker once again, but he was just too unique to pass up, and corner is a premium position.
When you get into these spots that are pass rushers, corners, or even offensive linemen, quarterback, when you looked at this year's draft, we felt like, man, it was a thin year at some of the defensive backs positions. We watched film for the better part of 3 hours today. If we get this player offensively, all right, great. If we don't, here's a clump. There's depth in some other positions. There's depth at running back. And so managing it and looking at like the grade, when George mentioned, like there was probably 6 picks we had to get past as he sat there. And yeah, I think it was value, but also knowing what the next few days present relative to the other positions. So the mocks that you guys read for the last month, what do you want me to say? It's embarrassing sometimes, but it's entertaining. And
But we read them, so
some of
what are you
them,
going to do?
not all of them.
Andrew Mason, Denver Sports. Sean, from your perspective as an offensive play caller and coach, how would you game plan somebody like Jahdae? And how good is it to have someone with this Jahdae?
No, it's a good
Jahdae.
question, because the first thing we ask with a complicated name before we call him is, how do we pronounce his name? And I might as well, I said, hello, JB. All right. But I think it's Jahdae.
So how good is it to have like someone, like Joyce said, unique like him? And how difficult can it be to counter somebody like that who can go slot, outside, safety, box, move around like that?
Well, in our 10 years, call it the last 15 years, with the rules and the way the game's changed, the cornerback has been a premium position, and then pretty soon the third receiver, the third corner, then pretty soon the dime packages, and more than 70% of your game is spent in these sub-defenses. And as George alluded to, when you're short, boy, that makes it difficult. These are premium positions, and like this type of player is less available than so many other positions. You know, we can, yeah, it's harder to find these traits in what he does than at other positions, not only in the draft and off season. And so he provides great flexibility. If you want to play a third down snap and put Surtain on a certain receiver, travel him to one, travel Riley, like there's a lot of flexibility. J-Mac, the four of them, it's real difficult if you're light there. And it would be no different than 20 years ago if you were light at just one of the two corner positions. But the value of these defensive backs in the last 10 years has really skyrocketed relative to how the game has changed.
You mentioned some of having the insight from Darren Rizzi's son and from Vance Joseph. How much practical help does that give you when you are evaluating a player? To, like, how do you kind of apply those insights?
It's more, what's he like as a teammate? What's he like in the classroom? How does he practice? Does he get along with, it's all the other things, you know, how does he treat others in the building? So it's not as much the football, but it's more of all the other things that you're really trying to grasp.
The day-to-day, you know, what's he
Yeah.
like day in, day out? Does he have a lot of bad days? Are they mostly good days? Those are the things you can't see on tape. I mean, our scouts get a lot of it, but to have someone inside, you know, it's really important, really helpful.
Jeff Leggold, ESPN. For both of you guys, given how much you're in the sub-packages on defense, where did tackling fit in the equation with him?
Well, it's prerequisite, meaning, and it sounds, but like, there's two things that make it difficult if we're talking corners, nickels, bad ball skills. It's tough because there's no repercussions when you throw it their way. And then poor tacklers, because offensively we can make them tacklers. So it's kind of like that's one of the traits that you have to be able to check a box on. And you can improve some guys maybe, but this guy anticipates. Man, again, we had the watch, and we were in a room of 8, maybe. Some of the scouts, I can't recall, but there was this just where we looked at each other and we're like, and then let's keep watching more. And then the more and more we watched, it was like, all right, let's be quiet. You know, so tackling it's important.
Okay, thank you very much, Coach.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.